You're going to a festival shortly. You're leaving Australia and flying to India. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this special festival?
Yes, well, from the very beginning of my sacred development, I learned the words eternal life, and the Bible promises eternal life. Jesus promised eternal life, but not very many people have actualized that. And the five immortals of the Bible, Enoch, Melchizedek, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, conquered death, but Jesus conquered it by going through death, and so did Moses. Moses was resurrected the same way Jesus was. Just that the Christian church has a better PR department than the Jews have. But the Jews have four immortals, and the Christians only have one. Actually, they only think about one. And so that is an interesting imbalance. But the idea of including the physical body into the conscious life of the eternal spirit, or achieving the longevities which are talked about in the biblical history of people living to be 500 to 1,000 years, was fascinating as a young Christian. And but I couldn't find any examples of it in the Western world, and so I read about immortal yogis, and I said, well, I guess I have to go to India to find an actual immortal. And so I took my first trip in 1977, which is 3 years after I perfected rebirthing and spread it to several 100,000 people, looking for immortal yogis. And since that time I've found 8 of them, which range from 380. They had to be at least 300 years old for me to be interested, because I collected all the books on physical immortality in the English language, and most of the authors of those books died before 100. And so I just arbitrarily selected 300 as the minimum age in order to qualify for my research. And so I met 8 of them between 300 and 9,000 that stayed in the same body for 900 to 300 to 9,000 years. And I 2 years ago, and so I met 8 of them, and I've learned a lot from them. They're the most interesting people on the planet. And 2 years ago I learned about a meeting of thousands of immortal yogis that happen every year, and that it's happened for hundreds of years, thousands of years even. And so I was totally blown away, because I have been going to India for 33 years hunting for immortal yogis, and I never heard about that meeting before, 2 years ago. And so I wasn't able to go last year, but I put it in my schedule this year. So that's where I'll be going next week.
And that place is, you mentioned a valley or some hills?
It's called the Gurnar Hills.
Gurnar. G-U-R-N-E-R?
G-I-R-N-A-R.
Gurnar Hills.
Yeah, and so because of that meeting, those hills are a very sacred place, and although there's no civilization there, it's inhabited primarily by sadhus, who are basically hermits. And it's one of the most famous spots in India, and I never heard about it until I heard about this meeting of the immortals. And if you just Google Gurnar Hills, you'll get all kinds of information about that place, the spiritual history, which is very, very rich, and about the Bhavna festival, the festival of the Lord, the celebration of the Lord, in which the Lord himself, Shiva, appears in physical form, takes a bath in this particular place, and he disappears in the water.
So he enters the water and doesn't physically come back out at this festival.
And so it happens on Shivaratri night, and
which is the full moon?
Celebration of Shiva. I don't know exactly what its relationship to the moon is. it's totally mind-blowing that meeting with the Lord has been going on for thousands, maybe even millions of years, and we are totally clueless about it in the Western world. And even most people in India didn't know about it.
Yeah, there's some pretty fascinating things going on in that country, without any doubt. What about you brought up in one of your talks about currency, about making new currency. Would you like to speak anything about that?
Well, everybody has the right to print money. Most people don't know that, and as a result, the bankers take advantage of that ignorance, and they print the money and loan it into circulation. And so
charging interest, of course.
They charge interest every year, and so the other reason that people stay ignorant of that fact because they don't see the payment of the interest, because the bankers just print the money and pay themselves, and so that has basically imprisoned people in a money system that doesn't serve the people. It's not designed to serve the people. It's designed to serve the bankers. It always has been and it always will be. However, everybody has the right to print money. And if people are intelligent enough to exercise that right, then they can design and print their own money, and then they have to get other people to accept it. So the bankers' money has a history, and it's popular, and people are used to accepting it. And so in order to get other people to accept your money, you have to educate them. And so that education process is a very interesting process.
Would you like to just stop for a second and we'll just sit outside of the sunshine? Because it's going to get very intense in that thing.
Well, what else do you have? That covers all the topics that you mentioned.
That's true, that's true. Did you know, for instance, though, that there's a place in Australia that prints their own money?
Where?
In Western Australia. It's a place that's seceded from Australia. It's called the Ord River Province.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
I thought I'd remind you.
And so, has it been working?
Well, I mean, whenever he did secede from Australia, the governments were poking fun at him at the time. I haven't heard a great deal, but I haven't heard that it stopped. I'm presuming if you Googled Ord River Province, O-R-D.
Old River Province?
O-R-D, Ord.
O-R-D.
River Province, you know, he's a self-made king. He's the king of his province. It was just a big cattle station or pastoral lease property, as I understand it. And once you enter into his kingdom, you're using his money.
That's great. Yeah, I'll have to check on that. Actually, I don't remember that name. I remember that there was a guy who did that from Australia.
Yeah.
And I watched it for a while and got information from him from somewhere on a regular basis, and then it just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I have a feeling.
O-R-D.
Yeah, in WA, Western Australia.
Yeah, I'll have to Google that and see what I... But, well, theoretically, everybody could do that. And...
Well, another gentleman in this country has created barter card, which is essentially using a currency for bartering.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that they're actually printing. I haven't been involved with it, but in certain parts of this country,
people need to get involved in alternative currencies until they learn how to master them. And in Australia, the lead system is quite popular. So I definitely recommend that people do work with complementary currency. And so if we ourselves actually print money, and we can convince merchants to take it as a universal discount coupon for 10% of our purchases, then we can at least increase our spending power by 10%. And if it becomes popular, and the majority of the people start doing that, and the majority of the people realize that they have the power to print money, then they can create a rational money system that actually does serve the people.
So we can get away from this international banking crises,
right,
and deal with things locally rather than globally.
Exactly.
Are there any last words that you particularly like to tell any viewers?
No, I recommend that people take the time and trouble to find a copy of the Shiva Purana. Shiva Purana says about itself that it is capable of totally liberating people. And it's the only literature that I have experienced that delivers that promise. It's totally amazing to study the Shiva Purana and to get the value that happens automatically just through reading the Shiva Purana.
So I'm not trying to be rude at all here. I'm asking, so you're definitely, excuse me, on the mission to try and achieve immortality in this body?
To incorporate my physical body into the conscious life of the eternal spirit, which involves total healing of the emotional mind. And so that's the promise in Genesis, and it's the promise of all the scriptures.
How old are you physically now, if you don't mind me asking? 1 year?
Yes.
That's a perfect answer.
I'm ever one.
Fantastic. Leonard, thank you very much for your time.